The Last of Us has been described as the Citizen Kane of video games, yet the comparison to Orson Welles' cinematic masterpiece, which in many respects was ahead of its time, lacks any similarities to the story, characters, the atmosphere and moods, or indeed the overall genre type of The Last of Us. The Last of Us is not the greatest action-adventure game ever to be made, although the action-adventure elements within it are excellent. Nor is it the greatest third-person shooter ever to be made. Games such as entries to the Gears of War series and the Ghost Recon series may well lay claim to that. Neither is it the greatest horror game ever to be made. Contenders for that may well be Dead Space, some of the Resident Evil series and The Evil Within, even though there are extremely horrific, tense and scary moments within it. Even the central premise of the story, the journey of an older male escorting a younger female, isn't original. This had been done before in games like Enslaved Odyssey to the West. However, what makes The Last of Us such an exceptional gaming experience and truly one of, if not the greatest games of all time, is the way in which it effortlessly blends so many game genres together, creating a hybrid genre experience with a resonating individuality. All of this is melded with perhaps the greatest example of cinematic storytelling that has ever appeared within a game. The balancing of all of the different gameplay elements with the powerful, emotionally charged, intriguing and surprising main story is an example of masterful game creation. The way that the game's structure pushes you through some of the greatest cutscenes ever made.
Right now, I'm gonna jump down there and I'm gonna clear us a path.
What about me?
You stay here.
This is so stupid. We'd have more of a fucking chance if you let me help.
Without the player ever feeling that it is preventing them from losing control over the game. The way in which gameplay flows into those cutscenes at just the right moments is consistently impressive.
There we go.
The Last of Us is set in a post-apocalyptic vision of the United States after the outbreak of a deadly mutating virus that turns humans into inhuman monsters. Even after all this time, and especially with the remastered version of the game, players will be immediately enthralled and drawn in by the graphical quality of the game. Every environment in The Last of Us is a carefully choreographed dance between realism and the fantasy post-apocalyptic scenario, resulting in the game always feeling authentic and relatable. It never feels over the top, and the excellent level design never fails to encourage both wonder and exploration. The very detailed and often beautiful environments within the game are complemented by a range of collectibles that range from resources to craft, to new weapons and armaments, to collectible medallions, as well as documents and audio logs that give insight into a world long gone. The gameplay mechanics are fluid, responsive and streamlined, resulting in players quickly learning the mechanics of the game, which become intuitive after a short amount of playtime. Arching over the gameplay mechanics is a light survival layer in which resources for crafting and ammunition for weapons are scarce. This scarcity becomes much more prominent on higher difficulty level settings, and often results in players having to use different gameplay techniques rather than sticking to one or two particular favourite weapons or approaches. Combat feels dangerous, and no matter how well equipped or on which difficulty setting they are playing, impulsive players can easily be caught out. Stealth, combat and knowing when to avoid confrontation or run are all equally important. It is fair to say that when this reviewer initially heard the concept for the game, the idea that Naughty Dog were entering the already saturated horror post-apocalyptic genre was a huge risk that might well have failed. Visions of Nathan Drake fighting waves of zombies just didn't work. Yet the game marched into those genres and scattered many other games to the wind. It presents us with a unique and original atmosphere, a combination of masterfully created graphical world-building work, animation and character model work, motion capture and voice performances, cutscene creation, gameplay mechanics, sound design, excellent story ideas, plot and narrative implementation. All overlaid by a soundtrack that in some ways really shouldn't work, a soundtrack more akin to a tragic romantic film than a horror thriller story. The soundtrack, though, is just one example of how Naughty Dog took genuine risks and dared to try something different, instead of staying on relatively safe ground. They risk the treacherous climb to a game that boldly stands out on its own, above everything created before and since. In this way then, perhaps The Last of Us is indeed like Citizen Kane. The Last of Us richly deserves the high critical appraisal it has received from critics and players alike, and above the litany of excellent games created is a must-play gaming experience.